Hello and welcome to another video review. This is the First Templar for PC and Xbox 360. This review is coming to you courtesy of Fusion Bunny. He sent me this, so thank you, it is greatly appreciated. This is an action-adventure hack-and-slash game by Hemimont Games and published by Calypso Media in May of 2011. And even though it is often confused for The Cursed Crusade, which was released later in that year, it's not the same thing. So don't confuse the two. It is kind of annoying when people confuse them, actually. But this was released to a fairly mixed reception. Some people liked it, some people didn't, some people said that there were technical problems getting in the way, and that begs the question, is that just because of, say, Xbox 360 or PC? What's going on there? And the ultimate question, though, is, have these issues been fixed, and how's the game in general? Well, as far as the presentation goes, it is a bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, you have the visuals, which are surprisingly well done. The modeling is pretty good. The animations are generally smooth for the most part, although there are some weird things here and there, like the lip syncing is pretty awkward. It looks like marionettes trying to talk. There really aren't anything to speak of as far as facial animations go or anything like that. So everyone looks kind of plasticky to some degree. And that gets kind of odd sometimes, but it's not that big of a deal. But the other issue I had with the animations glitching was where it would freeze, and you could still move the camera around just fine, but all the action in the game was just halted for some reason. Now, I don't know whether this was a graphics issue or not, but I feel it's worth mentioning because it seemed to affect animations the most. They just kind of glitch all over the place, and you'd seem to teleport and stuff like that. It got really annoying, and this was more of a gameplay thing than anything else because it ended up making your frame rate tank and everything. I don't know if it's just on my end or if this is a common issue. I didn't see anything about it, so I don't know what's going on there, but it got really annoying. But as far as the rest of the visuals go, they did a pretty good job with most of it. The texture quality in particular is surprisingly well done. It's very detailed textures. There's a fair amount of color, although I would have liked more color in this thing. A bit brighter would have helped. At least it's not the horribly blown and grey and realistic crap that you see all over the place these days. But I did notice something. This is just kind of a nitpick, but the blood pools when you kill an enemy, it's a really odd shade of color. It's this kind of purplish color, and it doesn't look like blood at all. So, I don't know why it's like that, but it just looks odd, and I don't know. It's just at odds with a lot of the blood effects in the game as well, so again, I don't know what's going on there. But you do have some nice visual touches, like on certain weapons that you get in this game. You'll actually see blood get on your swords. And that's actually kind of cool. It's just visual touches like that really add to the game. It's not a huge thing, but it is still kind of cool. As far as the sound design goes, you have music that's pretty standard, kind of adventure-ish music, and it does its job fairly well. It's not particularly impressive, and it's not particularly memorable, but it's not bad music at all, and it fits the game a fair amount. The sound effects themselves get kind of odd. In particular, you have some really odd hit sounds sometimes, and when you're in the midst of battle and it's making these weird noises for, say, critical hits and stuff like that, it kind of takes you out of the experience a bit. And the voice acting in particular is really jarring because they really like the Wilhelm scream in this thing. And everyone knows what that is. And it's been used in so many things. But it's a cliche. And it immediately takes you out of an experience. It's like, oh, this is artificial. This is made, not just an experience. And so, in this case, it's kind of corny, and it's meant to be corny. But it does take you out of the experience a bit. The rest of the voice acting in general is okay. They did have some really odd accents in a lot of spots, and there's some weird inflection going on. Amateurish voice acting, basically. And while it's certainly not the worst I've heard, it's certainly not that great either. But it's not really the presentation that matters the most here. No, what really matter are the story and the gameplay. And the story is that you play as 3 characters over the course of the game. The main character being Kellyan de Aristide. who is a knight of the temple, the Knights Templar, of course. And when the game begins, he is with his friend and fellow Templar, Roland. And the Templars come under attack, and they are trying to figure out who's perpetrating the events, that sort of thing. When they eventually meet up with the Grand Master of the Order, he sends them on this quest. And ultimately what the quest involves is the search for the Holy Grail. And the other character that you'll be playing as is Marie de Ibelin. And when you come across her about a quarter of the way through the game, you're still with Roland, and eventually it'll switch off. Instead of having Roland with you, you'll have Marie with you. And then that sort of thing happens. And so I don't want to spoil too much of the story, but there's a deal made of the fact that Kellyan has amnesia. He suffered a grievous injury in the past, and he doesn't really know anything about his past. And gee, I wonder what that's set up for, right? But at any rate, it's pretty much a Grail quest kind of story, and it works okay, although there are some oddities here and there. They really play up the Inquisition to be complete psychopaths, and while that is historically true, they really went overboard with them in this one. And the Templars themselves end up being kind of oddly portrayed as well. In fact, pretty much everything in this game, as far as portrayals go, is actually kind of over the top. And it comes across as actually a bit ridiculous sometimes. Some of the characters seem kind of one-dimensional. In fact, a lot of them seem very one-dimensional. Some of them are just out there in oddity land where you're not really sure what they're going for with that character. They kind of go all over the place. And the character that you're playing as for the entirety of the game, Kellyan, isn't really that interesting of a character. He doesn't really have all that much personality to him. And his voice kind of drones. So, when you come across Marie, it's a welcome change of pace, because she's more lively, she's upbeat, and she jokes a fair amount, and stuff like that. So you go from this rather serious Kellyan, and this boisterous, battle-crazy character, Roland, to this feisty character, Marie. And it's just a weird setup, in general. You expect the characters to play more of a role, but they don't really. It's more of a gameplay kind of thing than anything else. Now, that does bring me to the gameplay, and also I have to mention before I get into the gameplay, the ending to this game was incredibly disappointing. Because it had this build-up, and it was a decent build-up and such like that. But when you got to the end, it was just this arbitrary choice. And then a monologue, and it wasn't that impressive. So it just kind of gives you some history, and that's about it, actually. It actually doesn't really end the game. So that's something to consider with this thing. It doesn't really end, per se. It just kind of trails off. So that kind of took me out of the experience a bit. But when you come to the gameplay itself, how good is it at being an action-adventure hack-and-slash kind of thing? Well, you do have a variety of attacks available to you. You have combos, that sort of thing, that you can engage with various button press combinations and such like that. You have certain special abilities per character, like Kellyan has an ability to pray, and that will actually heal him, and if you get the upgraded version of it, it will heal your teammate as well, at the cost of a Zeal Orb. You get health orbs and zeal orbs. Health orbs, whenever you run out of health bar, if you have a health orb, it will replenish your health bar up to a certain point, depending on how much damage you took, of course. You replenish your health by finding food and drink in the world around you, and if you come across a chest that happens to have a full health boon, then that will also heal you to full health, both your character and the other character that you may or may not be playing at that particular moment. But otherwise, you'll have to do it manually, and you'll have to switch between the characters to get them to heal themselves, basically. Zeal orbs, on the other hand, are used to execute special attacks, and they are garnered by doing a variety of things. You can hit enemies, you can take out enemies, you can get hit if you have an appropriate upgrade, certain blocking maneuvers you can do to get them up. But you need these Zeal Orbs to do special attacks like power attacks, or certain combos, or special abilities, or other things like that. And they get drained pretty quickly, actually, particularly when you're fighting large groups of enemies that particularly if they're using shields, because you have to use a power attack to break the enemy's shield before you can really reliably attack them. There are also attacks that will knock enemies over, and then you can finish them off with the coup de grace, which, of course, you just basically stab them in the face or something like that. Sometimes when you kill enemies, you'll get certain animations that will be like, say, Kellyan will grab him and fling him over and then stab him in the gut, or maybe he'll fling him over his shoulder and then whack him with the shield and throw it or something like that. Those maneuvers are actually kind of gruesome, which, for the game's rating, it's kind of surprising, actually. But at any rate, those animations do add some flair to the game, and they do spice up the combat, which gets pretty repetitive, actually. Because while you do have a variety of maneuvers available to you, you'll probably end up just using the basic combo the most, and you'll be chaining it together in a timed maneuver where you get critical hits, basically. And it obviously does more damage and forces the enemy back and stuff like that. They do send a variety of enemies your way. You do get just your basic lackeys with swords. You also get more powerful lackeys with heavier weaponry. You get guys that have polearms that will actually knock you over and then try to stab you on the way you're still on the ground. You get big enemies that are really powerful. You also get guys with shields. Again, you have to break their shield before you can really lay the smackdown on them. Variety of enemies, ranged attacks, that sort of thing. The thing is that, except for Marie, you're a melee group. Roland and Kellyan both are melee only. And while they do have a nice presence in melee, Marie actually gets the ability to throw her daggers. And so she's your ranged character, and she doesn't really have that much ranged power, because until you upgrade her ranged attack, it doesn't really do that much. And, of course, it costs Zeal, which is a problem. But, anyway, the upgrade system itself is done by gaining XP. And you get XP for, of course, killing enemies, completing bonus objectives. You'll find chests that give you certain amounts of EXP, that sort of thing. And then you use that to buy markers on your character sheet, which gives you various abilities, like you might get an additional attack, or you might get a more powerful version of a previous attack, or something like that. And there's actually a lot of stuff on that thing, and by the end of the game, you will, of course, have the entirety of Kellyan's thing maxed out. And you'll also get Marie's maxed out as well. You spend the majority of the game with Kellyan and Marie. You do get Roland at certain points in the game, but he gets phased out for Marie because she's obviously a more interesting character, but also a very different type of character. She's light and fast, but doesn't hit that hard. Whereas Kellyan and Roland are both very powerful, but they're not anywhere near as fast, and they obviously don't have ranged attacks and stuff like that. So, it balances out pretty well for the most part. I did find that there are certain points in the game where it does get kind of ridiculous, particularly with the stealth portions, where you're trying to sneak up behind enemies and use the stealth kills, but it doesn't always work out that well, and they'll end up raising the alarm, which gets really annoying, I might add. Now, luckily I didn't really see any big instances where there would be a BS game over for no particular reason, and that's a good thing, because I hate it when games do that. But it does make you fail bonus objectives and such like that. As far as replay value goes, there are, of course, the various Templar inscriptions that you can find that are Templar Chronicles. They give you more information about the Knights Templar and that sort of thing. You will find various chests around the maps that will give you costume pieces, as well as parts of weapons and such like that, and you might have to do side quests to get these unlocks. They don't change how much damage you do or anything like that, but it's cosmetic, and it's just a bit of extra stuff in there to maybe spice up how you look at your character, like certain outfits look better and that sort of thing. And it's nothing that you can really go too far out of your way for. It's all stuff that flows pretty naturally with the game, and when you go along, you'll find stuff. It doesn't really require a huge amount of backtracking for the most part, although there are some that are just annoying because you might have missed it, and you're like, oh, well, now I gotta go back and get it. And since the game runs on a checkpoint save system, that can be pretty annoying, because you can't have this thing where you save anywhere and then it's like, oh, I missed something, I can go back to this save. No, you have to restart the whole level over again, which is, of course, extremely annoying. So that's something to keep in mind there. If you miss a certain side objective or something like that, and you really wanted that objective, then it's probably going to be really annoying. Granted, there aren't all that many side objectives that you'll probably want to go for, so it's not that big of a deal. As far as the rest of replayability goes, there is a co-op mode available. I didn't get a chance to play it because I don't know anybody who has this game, and I couldn't find any games online. Now, I do know that there were a lot of issues with people being able to connect to various games online, but I don't know if those have been fixed or not, and since I can't test it myself, that's kind of a big deal. But at the same time, that was one of the big things that really put people off of this game. They couldn't connect to games online, and they couldn't play this with their friends. And co-op was one of the big things about this game. So that really put a lot of people off to it. And like I said, I don't know if it's been fixed or not, but from everything I've seen, it hasn't. So that's a pretty big deal. When your game has a pretty significant co-op mechanic to it, and you're not able to play that, then there's a serious problem. I mean, you can play through the entirety of the campaign in co-op, and of course you can have the other person playing whoever else it is, whether it be Roland or Marie. And of course you coordinate with various puzzles. Whereas in the single player, you just switch between the characters, and you can order them to stay or follow if you wish. The partner AI in single player is usually not that big of a problem. Occasionally they'll blunder into traps, or they'll run off and fight enemies and you don't want them to, but usually they'll do pretty sensible things for the most part. And they'll follow you around if you want them to follow you around, or they'll stay put if you want them to stay put. They'll obey basic orders, and whenever you try to go into the stealth mode, you can of course find your teammate sitting there being in stealth mode as well. I did notice that the enemy is less likely to notice your partner than they are to notice you in the single player. So I don't know what that is, but it's kind of weird. And another weird thing about it was that you could go into the stealth kills, and actually you could take out one enemy, and then there'd be a pause while your partner actually went over and caught up to the other guy and then took him out, and he didn't notice. And the AI in general seems kind of suspect. While the partner AI isn't that bad for the most part, again, they'll blunder into traps occasionally or something like that, the enemy AI is downright stupid, because they have a pretty specific attack pattern and they'll follow it, and on top of that, they don't really notice you in stealth mode unless you are pretty much right in front of them. And so, when it comes to the actual stealth mechanics in this game, they're kind of wimpy, and it gets kind of odd when you're sitting there trying to sneak around and the guy's not noticing you, even though you're really not that far away from him, and you're sitting there in metal armor, and you're obviously making noise, and they don't seem to notice you. A stealth game, this is not. It is obviously an action-adventure hack-and-slash. They just have that in there. The thing is, none of these mechanics are badly implemented, but at the same time, they're not particularly impressive either. Like, the combat mechanics, in theory, are well done. They have a system for counterattacking, for blocking at, of course, appropriate times, giving you zeal orbs and stuff like that. And if they put more into it, it could be a very in-depth and very satisfying combat system. As it stands, though, it ends up being just about the most average action-adventure hack-and-slash kind of combat system you can imagine. Because you'll just end up spamming the same attacks over and over and over again because the enemies aren't going to really fight against you in any particular intelligent manner. You'll always end up having the same weird stealthy moments where you'll just sneak up behind an enemy and take him out, and his buddy won't even notice until it's too late, of course, and you put your sword in his gut. And there's just all these weird glitches here and there. The game is very linear, even though there is some exploration involved to find the extra stuff. The bonus objectives aren't particularly impressive. They do add to the game to some degree, but they aren't particularly important, and they aren't really things that will draw you in. The findable items and such like that, the costumes and the weaponry, would have been better served if they actually altered your stats. Maybe certain weapons are better against certain enemies, or maybe certain costumes give you more armor or make you more noticeable or whatever. That would have added more depth to the gameplay. As it stands, it's a pretty unremarkable action-adventure hack-and-slash game. It's not bad, and I'd recommend it to some people if they really like this kind of thing and they find it on sale, but other than that, I can't really say too much about it, because even though I had some issues with it, they're pretty much just personal problems that don't really affect the gameplay all that much. And I would find myself getting bored with it after long sessions of play. I would find myself toward the end getting bored a lot easier than I would, or a lot more frustrated than I would before. So it's a mixed bag. It's not a bad game by any means, but it's not particularly impressive, and I don't really recommend it unless you manage to get it on sale. And it does go on sale fairly often, so that's not that big of a deal. I give it a 2.5 out of 5. Thanks for watching.